Hello and welcome back to another episode of Warming the Bench. Bev and Daniela here. Bev, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you very much. All revved up for our topic today.
Me too. Me too. I'm very, very excited. We wanted to say again, thank you so much for everybody listening in. Please make sure you are liking, subscribing, following, turn your notifications on Spotify. We will have our YouTube stream coming very, very soon. Very soon, meaning after this episode, we will get all of them uploaded for you. Today, we're going to start with a results roundup. Again, there were some midweek games and just a couple of things we want to touch on because there's a couple of conversations we definitely have to have. Very, very quickly, there were some midweek games in the NWSL, Bev, and the NWSL is getting a little spicy at the top and at the
Mm.
bottom of the table, I have to say. So we had a midweek game. Portland and San Diego are currently sitting at the top of the table right there.
Mm.
And very interesting, it was a former WSL manager derby. Because Jonas
Okay.
Eidevall is the manager of San Diego. Yeah, and Robert Villaham is the manager of Portland. So those two are meeting again on the
Ah,
sidelines this week,
yes,
which was
yes.
fun. And and Emma Hayes was in the audience, so it was very, very WSL coded,
Oh.
this matchup. Yeah, very spicy. They're sitting at the top of the table. It's a really good game. Portland took this round. They met previously a couple weeks ago. San Diego won that one. Bottom of the table is Boston Legacy, and Boston is one of the expansion teams that just came into the league this year, unfortunately. So they're not faring very well, but
Mm.
to be a little bit expected given that it's a brand new team. It's really hard to get going. The other expansion team this year, Denver, is doing a little bit better. They definitely look a little better. They are coached by Nick Cushing, who is former Manchester City
Mm.
manager. So again, a lot of WSL crossovers into the
Wow,
NWSL.
there is.
Uh, yeah, yeah, it's quite a bit. It's quite a bit interesting there, but definitely ones to keep an eye on. And Kansas City is the only other one I wanted to highlight. They kind of ran away with the league last year, and this year they are not doing very well. Let me say, they are very they're struggling quite a bit. So definitely one to keep an eye on if you are a fan of the NWSL. Bev,
Mm.
we're going to talk a little bit about the WSL because it was confirmed with the result midweek between Leicester City and Arsenal that Leicester is bottom of the table, unfortunately, and will play
Mm.
to stay in the league, the playoff game against the WSL 2 league team that comes in the third place. I know we wanted to chat a little bit about them. Really tough result
Mm.
for Leicester. What did you think overall about just the whole situation?
Well, it kind of links back to what we were talking about last week about inequality and accessibility of
Hmm.
streaming and scheduling, and I wasn't able to watch that particular match because it was on Sky and all the different packages when you add them up is very expensive. But I did
Yep.
see some of the highlights, and obviously Rick Passmore came away from the match and he said, "Well, now we know, we're very clear that we're in the playoffs." To avoid
Hmm.
relegation. And that looks like it will be Crystal Palace. Now, I just did a little bit of research before we came on air, and I did see that Leicester City has always been in the WSL since its inception. So they are
Hmm.
WSL experienced. They've never been in a WSL 2. Whereas Crystal Palace, if that is the team that they are playing, the club that they are playing, they've been up and down. Now,
Hmm.
I would say that there are some clubs that are on the cusp. So they don't quite fit the WSL 2, but they don't quite fit the WSL either. They fit in the middle somewhere. So two
Hmm.
seasons ago, Crystal Palace was in the WSL and then they got relegated.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it's going to be very close. It's all about margins, isn't it? Fine margins. So on that basis, you
Yeah.
could argue that it's in Leicester City's favour because they've always been in the WSL. WSL. Don't know what your thoughts are.
Hmm. Yeah, it was, it was a rough game. 7-0, I think it finished.
That's right.
Obviously a very tough result and not the kind of results you really want to see in the WSL. Like that's quite a heavy battering,
Mm,
right?
mm,
Um, I'll I'll be honest, the way that they're looking, I don't know how they're going to fare against a
mm,
WSL 2 team in this playoff. Again, history and just kind of overall fact and maybe potential logic would say that they should win a playoff
Mm,
game. But I think when they've been in such this kind of rough spot right now, knowing that they're going to be potentially going down, not really able to get a win, not really able to make anything click or work that well, it's really hard. And I think when you're kind of your back is already up against it, I don't know. If I was a betting woman, I might bet on they could potentially lose that playoff. I don't know. I don't feel
mm,
very confident for them, unfortunately. It's really tough. And I know again, it's difficult result to see. You don't want to see a 7-0 battering in a professional league, of course.
mm,
But Arsenal had to play the game that was in front of them, and that's what was in front of them, right? So it's
mm,
going to be interesting. And I think that kind of takes us into the WSL2. This is going to be the final weekend, and it's quite spicy at the top of that table. 1 point
mm,
separating the three,
mm,
and Birmingham and Charlton in first and second place, or second and first place, sorry. They
mm.
play each other naturally, of course, in this final
Yep,
weekend because we need some
always.
spice to take it in.
Yeah.
Always, always. So all the games are kicking off at the same time, of course.
Mm,
And I think it's going to be really interesting to see who takes that number one and number two spot, or if Crystal Palace jumps, if they tie. There's so many kind of
mm.
permutations going on here. It's going to be
There
quite
are.
interesting to see that one.
I wouldn't like to call
Hmm.
it, to be honest with you, because if you
No.
remember with them in terms of the Lionesses when they were in the
Hmm.
Euros and they got frequently to the semi-finals and that was it. They couldn't jump beyond that, and it was almost like a glass ceiling,
Hmm.
thinking that they couldn't get themselves over that hurdle. And with
Yep.
Birmingham, you wonder if they can get themselves over the hurdle to get themselves into the
Hmm.
WSL without having to play a
Hmm.
playoff. Sometimes you can have
Right.
a psychological block, can't you? That you just
Of
think that
course.
is where you're destined to be, and it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's where you're meant to be. So, I just
Hmm.
hope that Birmingham can push themselves this time and get there.
I agree. I agree. I mean, as it stands right now, it's in their control, right?
Yeah,
Win the game
yeah,
and you're in an automatic position to advance. So you don't need to
yeah.
play any playoffs. You're good to go. But again, that mental side of it is so challenging. So we'll
Mm.
see. It's going to be really interesting. I'm going to have all of my screens, all of my million screens turned on to try to watch all these games this weekend for sure. Um, really other stuff. I'm gonna try. I'm gonna look kind of crazy doing it, but I'm definitely gonna try. Um, I other notable games this weekend. Women's Champions League, the second leg of both semifinals. Bayern and Barcelona will play on Sunday, and Arsenal and Lyon, or Lyonnais, whatever we're calling them
Mm,
these days, are going to play on Saturday.
mm.
Thoughts, Bev? I have a couple of thoughts on those ones, but I'm wondering what you think.
Well, the first 45 minutes of the first leg, I can't say that either really were getting themselves into gear. It could have gone either way. And then Lyon,
Hmm.
they got the first goal, and then they came back, and Arsenal got the two. I don't know. I can't call this one. I
Hmm.
think it's very, very hard. Again, are the reigning champions, and that might go in their favour in terms of the experience, because I do think the
Hmm.
experience or previous experience in that capacity of champions helps. Again, it's all about
Hmm.
margins, isn't it? All about fine margins. Anything that you
Agreed.
can get for your advantage, well, that just pushes the
Hmm.
envelope to the finishing line, doesn't it? But really, I think it's a
Hmm.
close call. I'm not sure.
Mm. I
What do you
agree.
think?
Arsenal definitely have an advantage. Yeah, I mean, they're the reigning champions. Lyon obviously are historical champions. They've won it so many times, but not recently, in the last few years at least.
Yeah.
But they have an advantage. Arsenal have an advantage because the last few meetings with Lyon, they've come out the winner. And that's
Mm,
been on the reverse end of it though. So last year they went away to Lyon and did a number on them and were able to come out of that semifinal as winners. Now they're coming into that game as the winner from the first leg. So I'm just kind of curious from a mental standpoint what that does, because they kind of had to dig in to get the win last year versus this time they have the advantage, and it's a matter of managing that advantage and not letting it slip away from you for sure.
Mm, I'm with
The
you. But
other,
sorry, but
yeah,
sometimes,
yeah, it's tough.
sometimes things can. You get the impression, like you've just mentioned there, that Leon haven't won in recent years, but then things can flip.
Hmm.
Things can come out of nowhere
Hmm.
and happen, and that is the beauty
Sure.
of not only most sports but
Hmm.
football as well. There's quite a beauty to it, isn't there, in terms of the beautiful game it's always described. So I don't know. I really
Hmm.
don't. And Leon are going to have home advantage. They're going to have their fans. There's always the
Yep.
12th player, isn't it?
Exactly, exactly. And then the second semifinal is Bayern Barcelona. Personally, only see this one going one way. I think Bayern were lucky to get a draw at home. They're going away to Barcelona. They're also going to be without Pernille Harder. She's suspended for yellow card accumulation, so that's a big goal scoring
Mm,
person no longer on the pitch for them. So it's not impossible, as we've seen. It's not impossible to beat Barcelona. It is just very hard, especially over two legs. One game, a one-off, is probably a little bit easier. Yeah, I gotta say, I think Barcelona are heavy favorites for this one, and I fully
mm,
expect them to take the win.
mm.
But you never know. Bayern might surprise us, and it might be a really fun, um, final if it's Bayern and Arsenal or Bayern and Lyon. You never know, right?
Yeah, that might, mix things up a bit. You never know, as you say.
Exactly. You never
We
know.
will find out soon.
Never, never know. Exactly. And then just very quickly on the Northern Super League, which is our league right here at home in Canada. It was opening weekend last weekend. Very fun, as we mentioned on the last episode. This weekend, Toronto plays their first home opener of the season, or not first home opener, their home opener of the season. That's here. Unfortunately, I will not be able to make it in person, but I will be watching, and I will give you guys all of the lowdown on our next episode. Vancouver, Ottawa, and Calgary all winless last weekend, so they're definitely going to be looking to pick up some points against the opposition this weekend. Let's see how it goes. Already some spicy fixtures lining up, and definitely some rivalries taking shape, Bev, which is really fun because as someone who has observed football from a global landscape, it's fun to see all the rivalries, the London rivalries, this, that. And now we have our very own at home here, which is really cool to see. Um, yeah, that's our roundup for right now. And I think we're going to shift in, Bev, to our next conversation, which is going to be a little more serious in tone, everyone. So get ready.
Mm. It is, and we would certainly welcome your comments. I know, Dan, that you mentioned you've got a few friends with a few things to say about this next topic. Well, the next topic
Definitely.
is about sexism, racism, and misogyny within the women's game. Very, very serious topic
Hmm.
because there are serious consequences
Hmm.
and have been. I'm going to kick
Yeah.
off with definitions, Dan, and I'd
Hmm.
like your input on this as well. So we'll maybe come away with a working definition that we can apply to the women's game. So, in terms of my
Hmm.
research, I found it very academic. Um,
Yes.
you could go down a rabbit's hole with this one. Um, they're very, very interchangeable and very similar in terms of misogyny and sexism. Racism, I would be
Hmm.
very clear in terms that it's a certain ethnic group believing that they've got superiority over other ethnic groups. I would say that's quite clear for
Hmm.
me. In terms of sexism, I would say that's a kind of ideological framework. It's a belief system, a value. And then
Hmm.
the misogyny is a behavioral enforcement. So I'll give a particular
Hmm.
example. So sexism would be the belief that women shouldn't be in leadership or in terms of football, in
Hmm.
managerial positions or coaching positions, especially within the men's game. And then the
Hmm.
misogyny would be the bullying, the harassment, and treating the coaches like,
Hmm.
like dirt, basically, or second class citizens. And there's another
Hmm.
one I've come across as well, and that's misogynor. Have you ever heard of that? Misogynor?
I have not actually. No, that's interesting.
A little bit of
What's that
education
one?
for you. Well, that
Oh.
is where sexism meets
Hmm.
racism. So it's women that are,
Oh.
yeah, on the receiving end of
Mm.
sexism and racism with an ideological stereotype of what women of colour are supposed to be like in terms of their characters and a historical understanding of them, like
Hmm.
like that they've got no feelings, that they're very very strong, but that is like
Hmm.
an open game, where we're here to knock you down. You've got
Got
no
it.
feelings, yeah, that kind of thing. And then of
Gotcha.
course we
Hmm.
we do have female misogynists.
Hmm.
Yeah, would you
Yep,
agree that,
we do.
yeah, female misogyny
Uh,
exists as well?
of course it does, and it's kind of all related to the concept of the patriarchal system, right? Patriarchy is a
Yeah.
system, and men and women are both complicit in keeping that active and alive and upholding it. It's not just
Mm,
a man thing,
mm.
unfortunately. Women are just as complicit in that, and we see that every day, sadly.
Absolutely. And I suppose there's lots of arguments and theories that you could put forward, but you might argue
Hmm.
that those that are female misogynists perhaps have come
Hmm.
from a background where they're deeply entrenched in misogyny, maybe a patriarchal family where there is a head or
Hmm.
multiple heads, patriarchs within the family, and through their actions and behaviors keep the female members of the family within their place. And so if you've been on,
Uh,
if that's systematic over many, many years, then you maybe
mhm.
without even knowing it, subconsciously have been assigned a role within the family.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. It's definitely coming from an upbringing or some sort of, or maybe it's the culture you were born into. Some people are very religious, and it comes from a religious kind of aspect as well. So there's
Yeah.
various factors I think that can contribute to that. And unfortunately, the beautiful game that we love is not immune to this at all. In fact, it's quite a big target of a lot of these belief systems and behaviors, as I think you're going to start telling us too.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to throw something else into the mix here. And I was
Sure.
part of my research. I came across a podcast by In These Times, and
Hmm.
Previn Carrion, very interesting. He said, I'm going to blow
Hmm.
all the traditional models out of the water and say, if he's relating it to Jung, and he's saying
Hmm.
it's a pathology in men. It's a pathology in
Hmm.
men that they are mentally ill. He said because if you consider it, this is one human, a male, being
Hmm.
aggressive, violent, can commit murder, rape,
Hmm.
domestic violence, some really visceral crimes against another human being, that being a woman. That's got to
Hmm.
be a mental illness there, and that can be pathologized. So, all the
Hmm.
cultural arguments around it, the fears around it, if you bring in laws, legislation, it won't
Hmm.
make any difference because you need to look at the pathology there, the mental constitution of the individuals that
Hmm.
commit these kind of crimes. I just thought that was interesting. I
Hmm.
wanted to throw that one in.
Yeah, definitely. It's very fascinating, for sure.
Yeah, Yeah. And I suppose there is
Hmm.
something in it because they are very visceral. You do get men that commit crimes against women, don't you? In that it
Yeah. And it
manifesting
has
in,
to
yeah.
e- completely, and you have to wonder where that belief or where that inherent ability to do that comes from. So yeah, the pathology makes sense for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I
Hmm.
went on to the research. I went into the research on how sexism, racism, and misogyny is manifested within the women's game.
Hmm.
And there are lots and lots of
Yeah.
examples. So I'm going to start off with the NWSL.
Hmm.
And this is NBC reporting on this. And the researchers
Hmm.
were King and Spalding. And they did
Hmm.
200 interviews of female footballers. And they were talking about
Hmm.
it was just the inundation of, and I'm talking coach to football players and managers to football players. And it was just systematic sexism and misogyny aimed at the women footballers. Now, I didn't know that. Did you know that? Because over in the other side of the
Yeah.
pond.
Yes, there was, I think it was around 2021, 2022, there was a bunch of things that came to light, unfortunately, with the NWSL and how for years a lot of things had gone, a lot of abuse, a lot of behaviors and so forth, been brought to light, and also the NWSL trying to sweep a lot of those things under the rug, unfortunately. And it just blew the lid off of a lot of things. A lot of coaches were reprimanded, were fired from their jobs, banned from coaching again. It was a really difficult period, um, especially because NWSL is in the United States, for a lot of people who probably know that. And, the national team has always been kind of at the forefront of fighting for rights and fighting for better things, especially, the equal pay. They were the first team to get that in their federation. So to hear that come out of this, and know that there's so many people who had been fighting against so many of these things, to see almost a defeat behind them. And it's almost as if they were trying to tell us indirectly as well, which is very fascinating because if I went back and listened to some episodes of interviews, sorry, excuse me, with a lot of big names, Kristen Press and Alex Morgan, people that a lot of individuals will know as players, even if you're not a big fan of the game. For years, they have said things that have teetered on trying to tell us what it was like and what it's been really been like in the NWSL. Yeah, it was a really rough time, and unfortunately, Sally Yates was a former prosecutor. She did a whole review as well of U.S. soccer. It was a very, very big story, and it really changed the landscape of how the NWSL operates now.
No, it was just amazing because they just said there was
Hmm.
nothing in place to that the women
Yeah.
football players could go to a higher manager and say, look, this has been happening. There was no redress, there were no
Hmm.
procedures and processes in place. And they said all that
Yeah.
happened was what mirrored major institutions, because you've mentioned the church. And the church and religion is very ingrained in America, isn't it? And they said,
Yes.
various institutions like churches and community concerns, all that happens is that people are moved around. They are not dismissed. They
Hmm.
are not, yeah, they don't lose their jobs. All that happens is that they are moved around and nothing happens in
Hmm.
terms of dismissal or losing their
Hmm.
jobs or some kind of penalty that's incurred. So I was really quite shocked by
Hmm.
that because I've always thought, and we've had these discussion that the USA women's team is
Hmm.
very progressive.
Hmm.
It's a,
Exactly.
yes, it's kind of contradiction.
Hmm. Yeah, they are. They are for sure. And um, that's what the contrast of those two things is quite, um, it's difficult, right? Because like you see it in such a progressive way, and then you hear that, and it just kind of shows
Yes.
you how these things are all very segmented.
Yeah. Oh,
Hmm.
absolutely. I want to talk about some research done by the BBC in December of
Hmm.
2025. And it was one
Okay.
particular weekend where they were monitoring the interactions between, well, so-called fans and supporters and what was happening not only in the WSL, but in the Premiership League as well. And it was
Hmm.
various high-level managers that were on the receiving end of abuse. Now, it was Arnie Slot was one of them,
Hmm.
but Sonia Bompasteur received
Mm.
50% of the total abuse on a particular weekend. And there that was misogyny in action. And it was threats about raping her and doing all sorts of
Hmm.
horrible, visceral things to her. And it seems also that in the UK, I'm not quite sure how it plays out in Canada and the USA, that
Hmm.
success is something also that seems to be jumped upon. It's difficult for people to accept success. So Sonia Bumposter obviously is a very successful manager, and it's not surprising,
Hmm.
therefore, that she's got a horrific amount of. Now you would know more about Chelsea than I would. What's your view there?
Yeah, I remember when that came out, and I wasn't actually surprised, which is bad in and of itself because I see it, right? I use Twitter, unfortunately, a lot, which is not the best social media platform. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
And you see a lot of it, and there's a lot of abuse that went on towards Sonia. And to be clear, nobody is immune to criticism. You can say, I didn't agree with this manager's tactics. Maybe that manager didn't set the team up properly. That's totally fine. But there was a lot of really disgusting commentary that went on against Sonia, in terms of her as a person, in terms of her family. She's married to Camille Abbely. They have 4 children. There's homophobia that got dragged into that. And it was all kind of rolled into one hateful kind
Mm,
of bundle. And it was really disgusting. And I wasn't at all surprised, unfortunately, to see that report come out because you can see it all the time online. And it really teetered on this is dangerous. Like some of it was sounding extremely dangerous, and that needed to be
mm.
reviewed fully in maybe more of a legal sense too, because of that.
Now it's interesting because I mentioned that term about misogynoir, which is the intersection
Hmm.
between sexual and racism, sexual abuse, sexism, and racial abuse. Now it would be
Hmm.
interesting that maybe in a few years' time, maybe even soon, that there will be some kind of intersection between sexism and a woman being gay. Do you know what I'm
Mm.
saying here?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know. Yeah, I don't know if there's a term for it. There definitely is some
Is
of
there?
it
Yeah.
because, yeah, especially actually all three Black women who are gay or queer in some regard seem to
Mm,
face kind of the brunt of all three of them. There's
mm,
also a lot of there's been issues, and I think we can talk more in depth about this if you'd like. There's been issues with players from African countries. I think Barbara Banda is probably the biggest example,
yes.
unfortunately, who's been kind of the target of people saying she's a man and like very
Yeah.
transphobic, and that's not at all the case.
Mm,
And unfortunately, it happens a lot to Black women because of maybe their appearance, and they don't present the way a woman is supposed to look or whatever it is.
mm.
And that unfortunately gets thrown in the mix as well. So that there's just a lot of, unfortunately, all these things kind of intersect, and it becomes really disgusting.
It kind of is a reflection of very limited thinking, isn't it? It's the ideology of what
Hmm.
a woman should be and how she should act,
Hmm.
and the space, which is very small, that she should have in a public setting.
Hmm.
Yeah, and
Hmm.
obviously the
Yeah.
Barbara Bandor, as you say,
Hmm.
there are women that are very tall, and there are women that
Hmm.
are quite well
Yeah.
built. Yeah, they're outliers
Hmm.
from what you would expect from
Yeah.
the mainstream, if you like. But it's part of
Exactly.
the limited thinking. Um,
Hmm.
do you know what I mean? It's part of the limited thinking where this abuse comes from, because these men cannot
Hmm.
conceive that they are beyond what they can perceive and what they know and what their background has taught them to be, or various other factors playing into that.
Completely, completely. And unfortunately, Bev, like we said, women are complicit in this. There's a lot
Mm,
of that behavior from women too. One of the most targeted campaigns against Barbara Banda was from a woman, which is more disheartening, honestly,
really? Yeah.
because you would think that we could be better and we should be better. And then, the way online goes, somebody says something, you hit the right audience, and everyone becomes just an echo chamber of that abuse and of that kind of behavior. But yeah, it comes from both sides, and it is very limited, and there's a lot of lack of critical thinking in things as well. But I think at the core of it is values and how you value speaking about somebody, what your value is in terms of what you pacify as good behavior, decent behavior, and also people who don't really participate necessarily in the abuse, but what they're willing to accept. So if you just scroll by something and you're reading a nasty comment and you're like, oh, that sucks, but you just kind of keep going, those things are passive as well. It's not
Absolutely.
necessarily direct complacency. Yeah, but it's like you're basically accepting it. It's like, oh, well, that kind of sucks, and I would never do it, but it happens, which is all part of the problem too, in some ways.
Well, it's enabling, isn't it? Your silence is
Hmm.
enabling. It really is. But
Exactly.
I mean, for me, ever since 2022, obviously in the UK, it's a
Hmm.
reflection of, for them, the misogynists, of
Hmm.
women being out of their
Hmm.
lane. That these women
Hmm.
are doing something which has traditionally always been valued as a male sport. They are dynamic now. Whereas in recent generations, in recent decades, you had to wear a pleated skirt and a pinny and be in the kitchen cooking. That was your
Hmm.
place at the kitchen sink. But now women, and I think of Chloe
Yep.
Kelly when I say this, that you can be up
Hmm.
to your armpits in sweat and mud, and then she can be wearing her pink nail varnish and a bow in her hair. Do you know
Hmm.
what I mean? And yet she's got that wonderful feisty attitude. So women footballers are presenting a very dynamic personalities now,
Hmm.
breaking
It's like the
tradition.
duality of them, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
It,
Yeah.
completely. And it makes people uncomfortable. It makes, I would say more specifically, men uncomfortable because, sport has been typically seen as this tough thing, this more masculine thing. And so when a woman steps into sport, and we speak about women's football, obviously, because that's what we love the most, but this is, I think, in women's sport in general, it's something that is seen as a masculine thing. And how dare a woman go into a masculine space and do those things, those allegedly masculine things. Sport is not gendered, in my opinion, but that's a whole nother topic. And it's seen as almost like a threat. It's like you're invading this very masculine space, but it doesn't need to be seen as a threat if you just understand that sport at its core is something that not only connects people, but it's good for our health, it's good for our entertainment, it's good for all of these things. But by limiting it to a masculine thing, you're not allowing the sport to really flourish as what it's intended to do, and it puts a
Absolutely.
negative connotation on it. Yeah.
It's very
Hmm.
interesting. I mean, this is only a point of view, but it's very interesting
Hmm.
that when may it could be the US, it could be the Lionesses, that when they achieve something big, there seems to be a
Hmm.
correlation with a spike in online bullying and misogyny. So last year, when it was the Euros, there was a deluge during the Euros of online abuse and
Hmm.
bullying. And the one that comes to mind is
Yes.
Jess Carter. Jess Carter.
Mm, yeah. Um, Jess, that whole situation last summer, it was fascinating because if you want to take it back to Chloe Kelly for a minute, she said something. She was in a, I think it was one of those pre-match press conferences or post-match, I
Mm,
can't remember. And they were
mm,
speaking to her about it. And she said sometimes the winning and the success will actually mask those behaviors. And so I think
mm,
it's a double-edged sword. So success in general will bring out misogynists,
mm,
but winning will mask some other behaviors like racism and some homophobia for sure.
mm.
But when things go wrong, it's all on the table, every single thing, as we saw, unfortunately,
Yes.
with Jess.
Yeah.
Um, and she, and I think what's fascinating is if you want to say, oh, she wasn't performing well, that's fine, but that was, England didn't have the best of performances either. So basically, in some games, all 11 players were not doing their best in any way,
Mm.
right? But the idea that her blackness or her being black is somehow the reason she didn't have a good performance or is a
Absolutely.
reason
Mm.
to blame her for it is so bizarre because there's 11 other players, or sorry, 10 other players on the pitch um, that weren't great, but there's nothing that you're not using anything against them in that regard to say the same thing. And that's what's um, more disturbing, I would think.
Yes, and it tells me that it's multi-layered and very complex because there we are, women
Hmm.
footballers by the misogynists. Well, according to them, they shouldn't be there. And yet, if they were
Mm.
losing, then it is the women of
Hmm.
colour in the team that would get blamed and not the white
Yeah.
players first. So there's multi-layered and
Yeah.
complexities within there. But relating back to
Hmm.
Jess Carter, and if you remember, there was the
Hmm.
decision by the Lionesses and the FA and the team behind the Lionesses that they would not take the knee.
Hmm.
They decided that it had lost its power. And so they, if you
Hmm.
remember, they stood on pitch side together, yeah,
Hmm.
arm in arm sort of thing.
Yep.
And
Yep.
the Italian team were with them as well, weren't they? They agreed that they wouldn't take the knee.
Hmm.
They were in support of that.
Yeah.
What did you think of that? That they
And
would not take the knee anymore?
yeah, you know what? I know there was mixed commentary on that. I completely agreed with them, honestly. I think taking the knee, it started out actually, in the U.S. I think Megan Rapinoe from the U.S. Women's National Team was one of the first people to take a knee or to not sing the national anthem, just kind of in protest of how people of color were treated in the United States, specifically Black individuals. And for a while, it was a positive statement and it was trying to say something. And she was one of the first, I would say, white players to do that because there's
Mm,
NFL players who have been doing it for quite a long
mm,
time in the United States. But it kind of became just a ritual thing to do. And I
yes.
believe the more instances of racism and the more things that have not changed, it's a great show of unity, that's fine, but what is it actually doing in terms of action, right? Like
Mm,
what actual results are you yielding from this behavior? And I think that's what the lionesses were saying, that this is not actually transpiring into anything positive. So
yeah.
why are we doing it? Because it seems to have lost any sort of whatever the intention of it was or whatever momentum it might have started. It's no longer there. So why are we doing it? We have to do something different that
Mm.
actually takes action and does something beyond just this show of unity.
But I thought the press conferences that the Lionesses did was very powerful because they said, well, it's not just
Hmm.
about Jess. She's not standing alone here. She's got us. She's got the
Hmm.
backroom staff. The FA are supportive of her. Fans are supporting of her. So
Hmm.
there were lots and lots of,
Yeah.
layers of people behind Jess Carter. And also Michelle Angerman. I mean, now Michelle is a very young player. And I saw
Hmm.
all sorts online aimed at her. And yet she
Hmm.
saved England twice over, didn't she? In the Sweden match
She did.
and Italy. Yeah, absolutely. Now, if that would have been one of the white players, I'm wondering
Hmm.
how that would have been, perceived. Is interesting.
Agreed. And you know what? Um, I I was worried for Michelle because she is so young, right? And fantastic.
Mm,
And she's going to be terrorizing defenders for years to come. It's kind of
mm,
terrifying to think about it. Um, but I was really worried because those times when she did get put on the pitch kind of in a, well, let's just see, let's just kind of throw the kitchen sink at everything and see if it works
Mm.
moments. And for those of you who watched the Euros, England were very entertaining, but they were very stressful at the same time to watch some games. Um, and when I saw, and I just kept thinking, I really hope they win this game because I know and unfortunately just felt that if they had lost, she might have been the target of a lot more abuse.
Mm.
When in reality, if you lose a game, 11 players lost the game, just like 11 players
Absolutely.
win the game when you win, right?
Yeah,
So that's what
absolutely.
I was really worried about, that she was going to get the brunt of that racism, unfortunately, and also being such a young player to manage all of that expectation as a player going on the pitch, but then to manage all that outside stuff just would have been a nightmare for her. And I'm really glad that it, as much as what she did kind of get was she was able to deal with it in camp with everybody, but that it wasn't worse, unfortunately, because I felt that it could have been if things had gone sideways.
Mm. I was listening to an interview with Lauren James, and now she gets a lot of abuse. Lauren, she really does. But
Mm-hmm.
when she's fit, she is
Mm-hmm.
brilliant, and I would say she is the potential for awarding of the Ballon d'Or for her in the future when
Mm-hmm.
she's fit,
Yes,
because it's like she's gliding around the pitch. It's effortless,
I know.
isn't it? Effortless.
Yeah, it
And
effortless.
she said when they were taking penalties against Sweden and she missed,
Mm-hmm.
she was
Mm-hmm.
so pleased. She said, I know this sounds awful, but from a selfish point of view, I was so pleased that white members of my team missed also, because it would
Mm-hmm.
dilute the abuse that would come. She said, I still got abuse, but at
Yeah.
least that would be shared amongst the team because there were white players that had also missed as well. And it seems
Mm-hmm.
to me, they never let her, the past, where in the World Cup, where she stood on one of the Nigerian
Mm-hmm.
players' back. She's never been able to let that go. People have not let that go. Oh well, she's abusive, she's horrible, she's arrogant, she's rude, she's this, that, and the other.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately for Lauren, she has done that a couple of other times as well. So she's not helped herself in that respect. But I understand at the
Mm-hmm.
time she's very young, very passionate, and she wanted to
Mm-hmm.
play the game. And it was almost like, well, get out of my way. I want to just get on with the game. There was some kind of, but
Yeah.
that does not excuse the abuse that comes her way. And again, as a Chelsea supporter,
No.
what has been your experience
Mm-hmm.
of Laura?
Oh my gosh, yeah, she gets targeted a lot. And again, unfortunately, there were some issues in her past, but I also think, there's a live and learn, and I do believe she has lived and learned, and unfortunately, she's learned the very hard way, what, kind of acting out in certain moments or passion getting the better of you. But you're right, people do not let her live it down, and she gets so much targeted towards her that even if she has the game of her life, someone will say something like, "Oh, she's selfish," or "She's
Mm,
arrogant. She needs to smile
mm,
more." And
mm,
the smile more and the arrogant comments, that's driven by her race, but it's also driven by the fact she's a woman because women get those
absolutely.
comments all the time. But
Mm,
but she cannot do anything right to some people, and I you can't tell me that that's not somehow racially motivated in some ways too, because
mm,
she could score a hat trick and perform at a 10 out of 10 level. And there are going to be some people who are just like, she's too arrogant. Great,
mm,
but she got us 3 points. Congratulations. You know
mm,
what I mean? Like
mm,
it's just there's so much abuse and people do not allow her to breathe sometimes. And I
mm,
do worry for her. I think she has a great family and support system, and the team overall are really good as well. And I think having
mm,
a very diverse team helps because unfortunately they will be able to share in some experiences. But I do worry for her, and I really just hope that people can dial back their hatred a little bit.
mm.
That's easier said than done, unfortunately. But yeah, it's pretty bad with LJ. It happens. quite frequently.
And again, linked to success, her brother, you know, that they come from a very
Yeah.
successful lineage, don't they, of football
Hmm.
players and
Yeah,
coaches. So again, that success is
definitely.
just, it just doesn't fit comfortably with some people in this country. Want to
Hmm.
move things on a little bit
Yeah.
to looking on the online. I know you and I, we kind of have a little
Hmm.
mooch about on online and look at the other groups that are so-called supporters of the women's game, and the
Yeah.
nature of the posts and the comments sometimes. Now,
Mm.
I've seen one recently. I'll give it's the World and Africa Women's Football.
Hmm.
There was a there was a comment just made about Millie Bright, and
Hmm.
there was a bloke, a guy with her when she was at Kings Meadow watching a Chelsea match,
Hmm.
and it was a comment of Millie Bright with a guy or an unknown guy. And you kind of,
Hmm.
I looked at that and I thought, I know what you're pushing for. It's solicitate. It's soliciting comment. Not above and beyond comment. It's soliciting abuse in a way, because I saw some comments that said, "Oh crikey, here she, whose husband has she got now? Oh, I pity the poor husband
Mm.
she's got. I wonder what kind of treatment and behaviour she's going to give him." So there was some comments, and I did comment, and I say, "She's a grown up. Leave her be. She's a grown
Yeah.
up. She's entitled
Hmm.
to her life," type of thing.
Hmm.
But you know, and there is a deluge, there is an increasing number of groups online now that purport to
Hmm.
support the Lionesses or a women's team. It's generally headed up as started by a woman, like you know, like
Hmm.
Katie Brown has started up this group. And when you actually have a look
Hmm.
around, it's women footballers in bikinis or
Mm.
in very, very kind of intimate and personal poses, you know? And you think, where did they get hold of this? And then the comments come in, "Oh, yes, you can sit on my face any day." And, "Oh, yeah, yeah, I know, yeah, come a little bit further." Do you know what I mean? And I've reported this particular group. And you know, I have to say that there is never really a category that you can explicitly report it under. It's almost like, oh, okay, I need a little bit of sexism, but I need something else as well, a bit exploitation.
Hmm.
What I would prefer is a comment section so I could actually write a few sentences as to why I'm offended by this particular group. It never seems to fit what you're looking for.
Hmm.
And so if there is a mismatch when you actually provide something as feedback, there's a mismatch in what you've seen and what you're interpreting that to mean and what you're providing the feedback for. It's very clever because it seems to have created a loophole around. I don't know what your experiences are, Dan. Does that ring a bell?
You know what, Bev? It absolutely does. Honestly, and that's not just to that platform. It is on Instagram, it is Twitter or X, whatever it's called now. And there is so much toleration
Yeah.
for misogyny and sexism. And it's actually quite disturbing because now with the introduction of things like AI and so forth, a lot of those pictures might probably be AI generated.
Yeah.
And that's another layer of that sexism and that lack of consent and just overall understanding of normal behaviors and how we treat people, but especially how we treat women. And unfortunately, you're right, it is so hard to get something taken down on the internet, especially in terms of if it's offensive towards women, if it's misogynistic in some way, if it's promoting, sexist behaviors and so forth. Because at its core, our society does not treat those things as serious matters. That's the problem.
Yes.
And so we
Yes.
expect our social media platforms, same thing with racism. I mean, there's so much racism all over the internet, but it's like it's very hard to get things taken down because it's not deemed a very serious thing. But
Mm,
for some things that do get taken down, you're looking at that and saying, well, why on earth would you take something like that off the internet? But these
mm,
actual real problems here, you're not addressing in any way, shape, or form. And I've tried to get a few things, taken off, especially on X. And you're right. There's never one avenue to be able to do it. And if you can find one, it's, oh, I'm sorry, it actually does not violate our guidelines. But thank you for
absolutely.
trying and
Yeah.
moving about your day.
Yeah,
Thank you. Like,
absolutely. Yeah,
lovely.
so it's like a double whammy, isn't it? Because you also, as a woman, have been
Yeah.
dismissed for reporting it in the first
Hmm.
instance. Absolutely. It is
Hmm.
incredibly
Hmm.
frustrating. And what is doubly
Yeah.
frustrating is the likes of Elon Musk. They are sitting back because,
Hmm.
that they're promoting democracy. But I think there is, and freedom of speech, there is a big difference between freedom of speech and
Hmm.
subtle and overt misogyny and sexism, racism, and bullying. There is, and it's out there.
Hmm. Completely, completely. I completely agree with you. And unfortunately, um, because of that, these bad faith characters, as I keep calling them, the ones who run those pages where they're objectifying women and so forth, that just speaks to the overall attitude towards women in football. Because if you're comfortable making a page where all you want to do is put pictures of pretty footballers, um,
Mm,
it again goes back to that idea of what a woman is supposed to look like. And it
mm,
also just speaks to how they believe what a woman's value is, and that their
mm,
only value they can bring forward is what they look like. Not that they're a great
absolutely.
footballer, not that they are a good person, not that they contribute to their charities or they contribute to the overall growth of the game or they contribute into different initiatives in their community, or they're going to be really good pundits. They have a lot of intelligence or knowledge. It's just, what do you look like and what value, usually of a sexual in somewhat nature,
Mm,
can they bring forward? And it's this very one-dimensional, limited view of what a woman is. And it
mm,
just speaks to the overall problem of how these types of people view women specifically. And you can see that there's so many layers, and it would not surprise me if a lot of the people who make negative comments about female footballers are in some of these groups or have these very, very, very limited
mm.
one-dimensional views of women because it kind of all intersects together.
Absolutely. So, you've got the women's game progressing. This is why we're here. We want to just chip away, don't we? We want to have
Hmm.
conversations and build a community that supports the women's game
Hmm.
and the women's game as a movement also. But so there's that in
Exactly.
trying to move forward. And there are then the misogynists that are trying to drag these women back into the cave almost. And in the middle, you've got that tension point, and that's the women suffering from online abuse and bullying and harassment, etc.
Hmm. It's a vicious circle,
It
unfortunately.
is. I just kind of, because I'm noticing it's kind of coming towards the end. Um,
Yeah.
if you saw a post, I mean, we both said that we've reported it. If you saw a
Hmm.
comment, the
Hmm.
misogynist comments, there seems to be like a template available, isn't it? Oh, Sunday League, you know what I mean? In
Yeah.
complete
Yep.
crap and all of the rest of it. But if you saw like a post and then you had all these comments from all the misogynists, would you interact
Hmm.
directly, Dan? Would you interact with? Would you
Um,
respond?
so I do sometimes, and because it aggravates me on every level, and 99% of the time, I regret interacting because it is just
Mm,
feeding what they want you to
absolutely,
feed
yeah.
into. They want that more interaction. So I get baited all the time by these people. I was going to say something mean, but I'm
You were
just going to
very
say
polite.
people. And It was very polite. And yeah, you just get baited into it. And I do it all the time. Unfortunately, I never learn my lesson because it
Mm,
bothers me so much. And yet
mm,
I'm giving them exactly what they want.
mm. It's a power play, isn't it? It's a power play.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep. It
they
really
want to go
is.
back and forth with you, back and forth with you. And the best
Hmm.
thing, I suppose it comes from my background in training, in that the best response you get is none. You get, it's very hard because you have to be
Hmm.
extremely disciplined to do it and you have to center
Yes.
yourself, but you give them no
You really
response.
do.
Yeah, the grey rock method, I think
Hmm.
it's called in terms of narcissism, isn't it? And they then
Yes,
get fed up
certainly.
eventually. But the
Hmm.
positive side is that that kind of interaction, even though it's negative, actually drives up the algorithms and helps helps the game. You know, the interaction.
Exactly.
So, you know, but they're so stupid that they don't
Hmm.
understand that, do they?
No, they don't. They don't. They're like, oh, nobody cares about women's football. Then why are you commenting on a post that's going to drive up the algorithm of the post? Just a
Yeah.
heads up, you're helping it. Thank you so much.
But then why have they bothered to find a group and then bother to put the time and effort into making a comment? You know, if it's crap and they're not
Correct.
interested and nobody watches the game, why? Because they clearly
Hmm.
do.
I they they clearly do. You clearly cared enough to do all those things to get there, so you might care in some regard. Oh, funny characters, let me tell you. Funny, funny characters. Oh my goodness. As Bev mentioned, we are unfortunately coming up on time. But Bev, closing thoughts. I think we might have to have a part two at some point of this episode because I feel like there's some topics we could definitely go a little deeper into. What do you
Mm.
think?
Oh, definitely, because I think we've both identified that there are layers upon layers here. You know, there's
Hmm.
misogyny, there's then that branching off into the intersection of sexism and racism, and then if you are gay, so it's got that intersection, then women, oh, then you're a
Hmm.
footballer and success. Yeah, there is layer upon layer of it, and
Everything.
that you can pick away, can't you? But we really would appreciate your
Definitely. Yeah.
comments on this. I think we would really get the comments
Yes.
in.
Hmm. Yes, yes, please comment, like, subscribe, do all the things, share everything, but we really want your engagement because we want to start reading out some comments again on the next
Mm,
episode. So please get
mm.
those to us.
What's our next topic? What do you want to choose?
Oh my goodness. You know what I would actually love to speak about is the difference in I'm going to say the difference in our football cultures, structures, foundations, all of that kind of stuff, because you can speak a lot to the European and UK perspective. And I can speak to kind of sport in general here and how even just the basic structures are different and so forth. So would you reckon we talk about something like that next episode?
Why not? Why not? We'll go for it.
Why
Yeah.
not? Let's do it. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. We will catch you next time. Please give us all your comments. And thanks, Bev, for spending your afternoon with me.
Oh, pleasure is all mine. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.